Bombs buried outside the warehouse, Spider-Boy was quick to flee the explosion. Azure Bamboo dashes to sever the silk. Flowing stage mysteriously turns into a weakling. Outside the abandoned warehouse, Shin Azure Bamboo and his men are blocking the entrance. He surveyed the warehouse and nodded. It seems like it's hidden in here. A new soldier eagerly asked, "Brother Shun, what should we do? Should we just charge in and kill it?" Shun Azure Bamboo looked at him with a mix of disappointment and frustration. "All you think about is charging in. Can't you use your brain? Do you think what's inside is some insignificant nobody? That's a flowing stage mystic. Besides, haven't you learned anything after having your soul nearly taken? Can't you show some improvement?" The younger brother could only scratch his head awkwardly. Shin Azure Bamboo took out the walkie-talkie and said into it, "Is the bomb in place?" The recruit on the rooftop replied, "Done. With the amount we've set, it should at least injure that mysterious flowing stage." Shin Azure Bamboo nodded. "All right. Now all of you stay hidden outside the warehouse. I'll go in alone." The younger brother was taken aback. "Brother Shun, you're going in alone? But inside is a flowing stage mystery. Brother Shin, you alone." Before he could finish, Shin Azure Bamboo interrupted. "Nonsense, do I need you to remind me? I just wanted to go check first to see if it's still there, to test the waters." Actually, Shin Azure Bamboo has always had a doubt in his mind. It felt strange from the very beginning that this flowing stage fled so suddenly. He then said to the crowd, "Bombs have been set up all around. If a fight really breaks out, I will immediately have you detonate the bombs. I can drain the air around me so the flames from the explosion won't harm me, and I can block the flying debris with an air barrier. What you need to do is wait for my signal." As he spoke, Shin Azure Bamboo took out a piece of bubblegum and smiled confidently. "After the bomb detonates, follow the original plan to surround and eliminate the injured spider." With that, he began blowing bubbles as he spoke, strolling leisurely towards the warehouse. Meanwhile, Spider-Boy had already woven a large web and was sleeping soundly inside the warehouse. The moment Shin Azure Bamboo walked in, Spider-Boy sensed it immediately. Looking down, he just met Shin Azure Bamboo's upward gaze. For a moment, their eyes met in silence. The next second, Spider-Boy's cries and screams, as if he were being abused, rang out, completely baffling Shin Azure Bamboo. This mysterious creature can actually take human form. And it can talk? Truly worthy of flowing stage. But why is it shouting for help? The next second, Spider-Boy revealed his true form. He made a sharp turn in midair, crashed through the ceiling, and tried to make a run for it. Shin Azure Bamboo forcefully swallowed the words so vicious that were on the tip of his tongue. Spider-Boy, after crashing through the ceiling, wished he had 8 more legs to run as swiftly as the wind. Shin Azure Bamboo thought to himself, "This is bad," and quickly shouted into the walkie-talkie, "He's about to escape. Detonate the bomb." At his command, the bomb at the top of the warehouse exploded with a resounding bang, creating quite a spectacular scene. Spider-Boy leaped down from the rooftop, screaming even more miserably. Not for any other reason but because Spider-Boy's butt was on fire. The air even carried a strange, savory aroma of roasted meat. Spider-Boy was sprinting ahead, while a group of new recruits chased after him from below. Spider-Boy, to say the least, has an unparalleled talent for escaping. He swiftly maneuvers between buildings using his spider silk, moving at an incredible speed. However, Shin Azure Bamboo's arrangements were extremely thorough. At that moment, 3 new recruits arrived in front of Spider-Boy. They leaped up and lunged at him. Spider-Boy stared at the 3 of them, a flash of red light in his eyes. The next second, the 3 of them fell from midair as if they had lost their souls. Shin Azure Bamboo, who had been chasing after them, happened to witness this scene. He glanced at the 3 people lying on the ground. He then looked at Spider-Boy and thought to himself, "Just as I expected." Then, with a wave of his hand, the ring on his finger transformed into the soul-cutting blade. Immediately after, he swung the blade through the air, severing the 3 spider silk threads attached to the unconscious recruit's head. Spider-Boy let out a muffled groan. The 3 lying on the ground gradually regained consciousness. Shin Azure Bamboo watched as Spider-Boy turned and fled, thinking to himself that with the spiderweb damaged, the spider deity must have suffered a backlash. He immediately let out a mischievous laugh. This is a perfect opportunity. With that, he snapped his fingers toward Spider-Boy. A colossal explosion erupted, sending towering flames that engulfed Spider-Boy. The next instant, Spider-Boy burst through the smoke and continued his frantic escape. Shin Azure Bamboo was stunned. Can this thing not die? This is just ridiculously overpowered. On the other side, Lin Seven-Night was on the rooftop of the female soldiers' dormitory building. After investigating the system, he found that the soul of the magic cube had also been detained by the psychiatric hospital. But can a magic cube really work as a caregiver? At this moment, Lin Seven-Night heard a faint tapping sound in front of him. Immediately after, an 8-legged figure darted out from in front of him. The figure landed heavily not far in front of Lin Seven-Night. Lin Seven-Night stared at the spider deity in the large pit before him, sinking into deep confusion. What is this situation? A delivery right to the doorstep? The spider deity was also dumbfounded at this moment. What kind of plot is this? Just out of the dragon's den, only to fall into the tiger's lair. The person and the spider stared at each other in silent disbelief. Please do not imitate. In the end, it was Spider Boy who couldn't hold on any longer. Trembling, he backed away, saying as he retreated, "Don't come any closer." Lin Seven-Night indeed did not go over. He directly used the abyssal deity ruins to slash the 2 long blades towards Spider Boy. Spider Boy frantically retreated, completely unaware that he had reached the edge of the rooftop. He suddenly tripped underfoot, and his entire body plummeted downward off the building, leaving only Spider Boy's long drawn-out scream. And Lin Seven-Night's 2 long knives spun in midair before swiftly plunging into Spider Boy's chest and abdomen. Lin Seven-Night stood at the edge of the rooftop and couldn't help muttering, "Strange, why am I hallucinating about a spider talking? Are the aftereffects of mental power overused this severe?" When Shin Azure Bamboo arrived with the others, all they saw was Spider Boy's motionless body, and 2 long knives plunged into his chest. He looked up and saw Lin Seven-Night sitting at the edge. Lin Seven-Night shrugged. "Sorry, you're too late." Shin Azure Bamboo didn't seem to mind and asked, "You're out. So does that mean the issue with Building 3 has been resolved?" Lin Seven-Night shook his head. "One has been resolved, but there's another. Let's leave it to the others." As soon as he finished speaking, a woman's voice chimed in. "The last one is right here." Molly appeared opposite, leading a group of female soldiers. And in the bag she was holding was a bloody severed arm, which belonged to Sound Hunter. Upon seeing this, Lin Seven-Night leaped down from the building. He sized it up and asked in confusion, "Why is there only one hand left?" Molly shrugged. "Didn't control the vibration frequency well. The rest shattered into pieces and smeared on the wall." Lin Seven-Night originally planned to collect Sound Hunter's body as well, intending to use it for summoning magic. Now it seems that plan has fallen through. But fortunately, the massive spider mystery is still there. Suddenly, the sound of an engine approached from a distance. Before long, a military vehicle pulled up in front of the crowd. Yuan Gang stepped out, scanned the area and said with a smile, "Well done. It's been a long time since I've seen such an impressive carnival day drill." Seven-Night sneaks to move the mystery. A spider signs the magic cube pact. If you ask what abilities they hold, washing clothes and dishes, all tasks intact. No sooner had the rookie dealt with the 3 flowing stage mysteries than Yuan Gang arrived by car. Stepping out of the vehicle, Yuan Gang could be heard laughing heartily, saying, "It's been a long time since I've seen such an exhilarating carnival day drill." As soon as these words were spoken, the rookies on the scene were completely bewildered. What carnival day? What drill? Yuan Gang naturally knew what they were worried about and waved his hand, saying, "Don't worry, those who sacrificed in this drill are not in any real danger. We have already scored each of you based on today's performance, and the results will be announced tomorrow morning. By the way, training for today and tomorrow is cancelled. Take a good rest." Dismissed. Hearing that there were no casualties and that they could have 2 days off, the new recruits burst into cheers, creating a lively atmosphere. However, Lin Seven-Night quietly dragged Spider Boy's corpse, attempting to pack it up and take it away, truly exuding a sneaky vibe. Suddenly, a cough sounded behind the sneaky Lin Seven-Night. Yuan Gang stood behind Lin Seven-Night and asked, "What are you moving it for?" Lin Seven-Night couldn't exactly say he was planning to use it as a sacrificial offering for a summoning ritual. Without thinking, he blurted out, "I want to eat braised spider legs." Yuan Gang naturally couldn't believe it and said helplessly, "All mysterious corpses that died during the exercise must be recovered. You won't get to eat braised spider legs." At that moment, an instructor came up behind Yuan Gang and whispered something to him. Yuan Gang sighed after hearing this. Hand over the corpse of the Rubik's Cube. Lin Seven-Night avoided eye contact, not daring to look directly. The Rubik's Cube? It exploded into pieces, There's no corpse left. I chopped it into pieces. It turned into something like sand and vanished, leaving nothing behind. Yuan Gang raised an eyebrow. Oh, is that so? If not, then so be it. With that, he turned and walked away. The recruits have rested, but the instructors are practically at each other's throats. Each of them has a different scoring standard for the recruits. One says you scored too high, another says you scored too low. One accuses you of being biased, another calls you petty. It almost escalated into personal attacks. In short, it was a huge argument. However, in the end, a scoring sheet was still put together and handed over to Yuan Gang. Everyone's scores are on it, except for Lin Seven-Night's. No other reason, these instructors just didn't dare to grade him. Yuan Gang was taken aback by this. Didn't dare to grade him? Why wouldn't they dare? Instructor Han nodded and explained. During this exercise, whether it's combat ability, insight, or command skills, Lin Seven-Night performed at the highest level. If we were to grade strictly by the rules, he might very well have scored a perfect mark. Instructor Han nodded. Actually, the point we're struggling with is right here. If we were to give a score of 20, in the history of our new recruit training camp, there has never been a perfect score before. Yuan Gang thought for a moment. Then let's give him 19 points. Instructor Han was taken aback. How do you explain that 1-point deduction? Yuan Gang smiled. One more point and he might get arrogant. Besides, those who want to keep the Rubik's Cubes remains always have to pay a price. In the psychiatric hospital of the gods, Spider-Boy cried so pitifully in his cage. All he wanted was to get some sleep, so how did he end up in prison out of nowhere? Before long, the sound of footsteps grew closer, and a figure appeared before him. Lin Seven-Night wore a smile more villainous than any antagonist's. Welcome to my psychiatric hospital of the gods, little spider. That grin nearly scared Spider-Boy out of his wits on the spot. After Spider-Boy calmed down, Lin Seven-Night asked curiously, "You're a spider?" Spider-Boy flew into a rage upon hearing this. "You're just a swinder." Looking at the aggrieved Spider-Boy, Lin Seven-Night suddenly recalled the voice he had heard when he saw it on the rooftop. It turned out to be Spider-Boy speaking. With a single thought from Lin Seven-Night, a system panel materialized above Spider-Boy's prison cell. Fear level reaches 60. Eligible to hire him as a caregiver. Lin Seven-Night was completely stunned. This fear value is ridiculously high. Am I really that scary? Spider-Boy, overcoming the fear in his heart, leaned against the cage and whispered, "Please don't kill me, okay? If you really want to eat braised spider legs, I can give you one. No, I can even give you two." Lin Seven-Night was utterly dumbfounded upon hearing this and said speechlessly, "I don't want your spider legs, I want you. Don't get me wrong. What I meant was, come work as a caregiver at my hospital." Spider-Boy looks confused. A caregiver? What's that for? Lin Seven-Night thought about the current situation at the psychiatric hospital, organized his words and said, "It's just accompanying the elderly gentleman in reading, cheering up the elderly ladies, sometimes cooking, doing laundry, and running a marathon. Actually, it's quite relaxed." Spider-Boy didn't notice anything off about Lin Seven-Night's words and cautiously asked, "So if I become a caregiver, you won't kill me anymore?" Lin Seven-Night nodded, of course. With that, he reached out and summoned a contract, saying, "Come on, sign the employment contract right now." After dealing with Spider-Boy, Lin Seven-Night arrived at the cell where the Rubik's Cube was held. It was the familiar choice between two options, but this time, Lin Seven-Night's computational abilities were all within its sight. Lin Seven-Night has just realized that the hiring requirements for each caregiver are different. Li Flying is loyal, because loyalty is the prerequisite for him not to betray. As for Spider-Boy, the best way to control him is to exploit his fear. And this magic cube, it is not a biological entity in the traditional sense. It lacks loyalty and fear. To control it more effectively, one must impress it intellectually. At this thought, Lin Seven-Night said, "Prove your worth. My psychiatric hospital doesn't support idlers." When the Rubik's Cube and Lin Seven-Night laid all their cards on the table, Lin Seven-Night laughed very happily. Li Flying was about to go do the laundry. As soon as he stepped out, he saw Lin Seven-Night holding a child's hand, with a magic cube floating behind him, strolling leisurely over. Li Flying looked puzzled. "Seven-Night, what's going on?" Seven-Night patted Spider-Boy's head. "New caregiver. This one is called a spider, and this one is called the Rubik's Cube." Upon hearing that it was a new caregiver, Li Flying immediately burst into tears, with both tears and a runny nose streaming down. He immediately slid down on his knees and hugged Lin Seven-Night's leg. "Seven-Night, You're the one who truly cares about me. You know I'm exhausted all by myself. He cried and cried. Li Yiflang's gaze unconsciously drifted toward the Rubik's Cube as he asked, "What can this thing be used for?" Lin Seven-Night snapped his fingers and said, "Come on, Rubik's Cube, show us what you've got." As soon as the words were spoken, the dirty clothes and laundry detergent in Li Yiflang's laundry basket all floated up into the air. Those clothes spun around the magic cube continuously, and then the cube rotated faster and faster. Finally, only a water sphere could be seen floating mid-air. When the Rubik's Cube came to a stop again, Li Yiflang couldn't help but widen his eyes in astonishment. Rubik's Cube brand automatic washing machines, dryers, mahjong tables, and so much more, all dedicated to serving you. Li Yiflang clapped excitedly. Finally, no more hand-washing clothes and dishes. Seven-Night, you have no idea how many calluses I've developed on my hands during this time. With that, Li Yiflang turned to Spider and asked, "And you? What special skills do you have?" Spider said a bit sheepishly, I can sleep." Lin Seven-Night suddenly remembered something and said, "I have something to attend to, so I'll take my leave first." Spider doesn't know anything, but he's quite malleable. Please teach him more." With that, he disappeared before the others. Li Yiflang thought for a moment, then patted Spider and said, "Spider, do you know how to play mahjong?" Spider is dumbfounded. What's going on? Scored first in the assessment, Seven-Night summons a mummy. Devouring weapons in the armory, the instructors are collectively baffled. Lin Seven-Night has just briefed Li Yiflang on the new caregiver, Spider, and the Rubik's Cube. He was then shaken awake from his bed by Bai Li Fatty. Lin Seven-Night looked at Fatty with a face full of surprise. "You actually woke up this early. No matter who you are, get off Fatty right now." Fatty ignored Lin Seven-Night's teasing and exclaimed excitedly, "The scores from yesterday's exercise are out. You're first. You got 19 points. That's a full 2 points higher than the second place." Lin Seven-Night was surprised instead. "Why was I deducted 1 point? Where was it deducted?" Fatty shook his head, indicating he didn't know. Then with a smile on his face he said, "Speaking of which, aren't you curious about who came in second?" Lin Seven-Night was about to say he wasn't curious, but seeing Fatty's eager expression, he simply followed up and asked, "You wouldn't happen to be that second place, would you?" Fatty chuckled. You saw right through me." "That's right. Young Master and Chow Abyss are tied for second place." But after Fatty finished speaking, he realized that Lin Seven-Night had disappeared. Turning around, he saw that Lin Seven-Night was already at the door. "Fatty, I have something to take care of outside. I'll be right back," he said before turning and leaving. Fatty wanted to chase after him, but Seven-Night ran too fast. He also closed the door behind him. Fatty took out a watch with some disappointment and said regretfully, "I was just about to give you this watch as a proper celebration." On the other side, Lin Seven-Night left the dormitory and headed to the remote weapons warehouse. The area was completely deserted, making it the perfect spot for him to conduct some experiments. He then placed the fragments of the Rubik's Cube into the magic circle. As the fragments were devoured by the magic circle, a surge of light emerged, enveloping Lin Seven-Night within it. At this moment, Lin Seven-Night appeared as if standing upon the starry sea, surrounded by drifting orbs of light both large and small. Within them, one could faintly glimpse creatures that looked overwhelmingly powerful. Lin Seven-Night nodded to himself. Choosing this remote weapons warehouse had truly been the right decision. The commotion was far too great. Lin Seven-Night scanned the glowing spheres and reached out toward one of them. There was an invisible barrier on it, preventing Lin Seven-Night from touching it. Lin Seven-Night withdrew his hand. It seemed these were all high-level summoned creatures. With his current soul strength, he was unable to form a contract with these beings. Suddenly he looked toward a smaller light cluster nearby. Seemed this one might be possible. Inside that light cluster was a small mummy, silently advancing through the barren desert. Lin Seven-Night was somewhat puzzled. Given his magical talent, he should have been a formidable combatant by all means. But this mummy doesn't look powerful at all. Lin Seven-Night shook his head and said, "Forget it, let's give it a try. There's not much time left." As he spoke, he raised his hand and conjured a magic circle on the desert sand. The little mummy wobbled over to the edge of the magic circle, tilting its head up to look at Lin Seven-Night with a puzzled expression. Lin Seven-Night instantly transformed into a pyramid scheme leader. "Answer my call, and I will make you the king of this world." The mummy didn't seem to understand, but still took a step forward. It stood within the magic circle. A flash of light swept by, and it vanished from the desert world along with the little mummy. When Lin Seven-Night opened his eyes again and saw the scene before him, he couldn't help but laugh and say, "It worked." And that small mummy was now sitting right in front of him. The mummy looked around and then stood up, heading toward the weapons piled up in the warehouse. It first picked up a rifle and examined it from top to bottom. Then it opened its mouth wide and bit down on the rifle. Lin Seven-Night was dumbfounded. How can this thing eat weapons? And that's not all. The little mummy had a grenade in its left hand and a long knife in its right, shoveling them into its mouth like crazy. Lin Seven-Night was going crazy. Wait, you can't eat those. But before he could stop it, the mummy's body rapidly expanded. In just a few breaths it had already grown to the size of an adult. Even more bizarrely, various weapons emerged from its body, all things it had just devoured. Lin Seven-Night looked it up and down. It seems this little creature's ability is to store the weapons it eats and turn them into its own power. The mummy pointed to the other weapons, as if asking something. Lin Seven-Night thought for a moment and understood. "Are you asking if these can be eaten?" With a wave of his hand he said, "Eat without worry. Eat boldly. Open your stomach and eat heartily. Consider it my gift to you as a token of our meeting." A few hours later, Instructor Hong and Instructor Gu arrived at the weapons warehouse door, ready to pick up some weapons. As soon as they stepped inside, the two noticed that the echo in the room was unusually loud today. Taking a closer look, good heavens! The weapons warehouse was completely empty. Not even a single strand of hair left. Even the weapon racks had vanished. The emptiness was downright unsettling. Instantly the two exclaimed in unison, "What the hell, where are the weapons?" The matter was immediately reported to Yuan Gang, whose reaction was much the same as theirs. "What do you mean? The weapons warehouse is empty? What's going on?" Instructor Han felt a throbbing in his temples. "Sir, it's exactly what it sounds like. All the weapons are gone." Instructor Hong nodded and added, "We checked all the surveillance footage around the area. There was no sign of anyone moving anything." Yuan Gang frowned. "Not an outside thief? Could it be an inside job then?" Instructor Hong sighed. "Even if there is an inside job, that was a whole warehouse of weapons. If they weren't smuggled out of the training camp, where could they possibly be hidden?" Instructor Han nodded. "We've searched everywhere, not even a screw was found. We were about to dig up the training ground." At this point Yuan Gang's eyes sharpened. "Wait a moment. Think I know. There's someone who could hide an entire warehouse of weapons without anyone noticing." The special team competes for personnel, and the announced transfer order raises suspicions of unfairness. New recruits charge into sudden natural disasters, death retreats, survivors live. In a dense forest, the sounds of battle occasionally emerge, only to fall silent again shortly after. In the dense forest, a blonde woman stands there. Before her lies a large, mysterious creature that has just met its end. The woman pulls out a piece of paper and examines it carefully, saying, "We must secure this. Dual deity agent, ranked first in the training camp, and even possesses the celestial lights medal. This Lin Seven-Night has immense potential. We absolutely must lure him to." At this point the woman paused. She probably realized her choice of words was inappropriate and quickly corrected herself, saying, "No, I mean recruit him to our Phoenix team." The bespectacled man behind her sighed at the sight. "Captain, can you please calm down? Our team isn't short on people right now." The woman shook her head. "Even if we're not recruiting, we have to bring him in. This Lin Seven-Night, once he grows, will definitely become a terrifying presence, surpassing both me and King Face. A talent like this, our Phoenix team absolutely cannot miss out on him." The bespectacled man frowned. "But according to the regulations, our special squad cannot recruit new members unless we suffer significant personnel losses." The woman frowned. "Oh right. What should we do then?" Suddenly the woman's eyes lit up. She fixed her gaze on the bespectacled man. The bespectacled man's heart sank. Before he could say anything, the woman pulled him close. "How about this? I'll beat you to a pulp first, then report you as a casualty. After I've abducted Lin Seven-Night, I'll help you recover. Isn't this a win-win solution?" The man broke into a cold sweat upon hearing this, thinking to himself, is the team leader dropping all pretense and planning to resort to outright abduction now? On another battlefield, a massive octopus-like mysterious entity lies lifeless atop the ruins of a skyscraper, while two figures stand leisurely on its head. Libra looks at King Face. "Captain Lin Seven-Night is about to graduate. Should we apply to transfer him here?" Kingface slightly shakes his head. No need. Libra looks slightly surprised. Why? We have a good relationship with Lin Seven-Night. If we send an invitation, he should agree. Kingface chuckled lightly. Someone like him is destined to form his own special team. Joining other squads would only limit his growth. At the new recruit training camp, Biley Fatty returned to the dormitory with a gloomy expression. Lin Seven-Night, seeing him like this, asked, "What's wrong? You were called away early in the morning and only just came back now." Fatty was also at a loss. "I don't know. As soon as I entered, the instructor checked my pocket dimension." Lin Seven-Night immediately guessed what was going on and pretended not to care as he continued to ask, "So what did the instructor say?" Fatty also looked puzzled. "He didn't say anything. After checking, he just let me go, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost." Lin Seven-Night finally felt a weight lift off his mind. It seemed that his act of summoning a mummy to empty the armory hadn't been exposed. Suddenly, a whistle for assembly sounded. Lin Seven-Night and Fatty were taken aback. How strange, wasn't the training already over? Why were they being called to assemble now? Still, the two of them headed outside. Before long, all the new recruits had assembled on the training ground. Yuan Gang scanned the crowd and announced loudly, "Today is your final assembly. Not for training, but to announce your assignments." Upon hearing this, Fatty said with a hint of excitement, "I wonder where we'll be assigned. I hope I can go back to Chao Abyss near Guangshun." Chao Abyss shrugged and said, "I don't really mind. It would be best if I could be assigned with Seven-Night, but he'll probably be sent to Shangjing or a special squad." Yuan Gang began to read out the assignments, and after a short while, he announced, Molly transferred to Team 17 in Gusu City. Biley Daylight transferred to Team 010 in Guangshan City. Shun Azure Bamboo transferred to Team 006 in Shangjing City. Chao Abyss transferred to Team 007 in Huaihai City. At this moment, Yuan Gang paused briefly before continuing. Lin Seven-Night transferred to Team 136 in Songnan City. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire room erupted in an uproar. Fatty and Chao Abyss were especially astonished. Fatty exclaimed in disbelief, "How is that possible? Seven-Night is the top performer." Chao Abyss also questioned whether there had been some mistake. At that moment, Shun Azure Bamboo let out a disdainful snort and spat the bubblegum in his mouth onto the ground. All of this was noticed by Yuan Gang, who frowned and said, "Shun Azure Bamboo, do you have a problem?" Shun Azure Bamboo raised his hand and said, "Report, I'm not convinced. Lin Seven-Night was the top performer, so why was he transferred to a place like Songnan? He's stronger than me. If someone of his caliber can only stay in Songnan, then what right do I have to go to Shangjing?" At that moment, a light rain began to fall from the sky. Yuan Gang stood in the rain and said, "I understand better than anyone else that Lin Seven-Night is the one who truly deserves to be given important responsibilities. But we are soldiers. Soldiers must follow orders." Fatty looked at Lin Seven-Night with some concern. Lin Seven-Night, however, shook his head with a smile. "No need to comfort me. Being able to stay in Songnan is something I've always wished for. My goal has never been to protect humanity, or to stand out among others. I only wish to fulfill the promise I made with Zhao Empty City." Chao Abyss was about to say something but suddenly paused, exclaiming, "Wait, do any of you feel like the ground is shaking?" Upon hearing this, Lin Seven-Night crouched down and lightly touched the ground with his hand to sense it. "You're not wrong, it really is shaking, and the amplitude is getting bigger." At this moment, Instructor Han approached Yuan Gang's ear and whispered a few words to him. Yuan Gang's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. "What did you say?" Then he turned and shouted to the recruits below. 10 minutes ago, a sudden earthquake near South Jin Mountain triggered a massive mudslide. 7 surrounding villages have been affected. The only place that can quickly mobilize a large number of personnel right now is our training camp. Great Xia needs you. Use your ability to protect the city and support the victims." At the foot of South Jin Mountain, the village swept by the mudslide is now in ruins. A man ran towards his home, but as he got closer, he was utterly devastated. His house had been crushed beyond recognition by the mud and rocks. In a panic, he rushed to the scene. He desperately dug through the rubble with his hands, crying out, "Is there anyone who can save us?" Suddenly, lights turned on behind him. Several military trucks stopped behind him. Footsteps echoed as the new recruits disembarked from the trucks. The leader shouted loudly, "Great Xia soldiers are here. Death, step aside. Survivors must live." Everyone rushed up the mountain to rescue, and Murmur appeared in front of the command post. The girls' parents did not return. Azure Bamboo went alone to rescue them. At the foot of South Jean Mountain, inside the temporary command post of the Night Watchers, Instructor Hong was marking on the unfolded map and said, "Our team's rescue target is right here." After saying this, he pointed to the marked location on the map. "This is village number 1, located deep within the South Jean Mountain. The vehicle can't get in, so we must reach the destination on foot within 4 hours." Lin Seven-Night and others saluted, yes. In the rainy night, Night Watchers' physical abilities far surpassed those of ordinary people, allowing Lin Seven-Night and his group to sprint toward their destination almost unimpeded. Just as they rounded a bend in the mountain path, Lin Seven-Night came to an abrupt halt and shouted loudly, "Be careful. There's a landslide on the right side." As he spoke, huge boulders from the collapsing mountain came crashing toward the group. Molly reached out to draw her sword, but she was stopped as Biley Fatty grabbed her wrist firmly. Fatty said sternly, "No, the mountain structure is too fragile right now. Using the forbidden ruins will only speed up their collapse." After speaking, Fatty walked to the front of the group, raised both hands toward the sky. A strong golden light burst forth from the jade light on his chest. In an instant, a golden shield emerged, enveloping everyone within it. Despite the rain of boulders, it stood firm and unshaken. Molly gazed at Fatty's back, unsure why. She felt that he seemed different today. On the other side, in front of the command center, an instructor was reporting the rescue situation to Yuan Gang. Yuan Gang gazed at South Jean Mountain and murmured, "Maintaining this level of rainfall for an extended period will definitely trigger another mudslide. They must..." Before he could finish his words, the raindrops around him suddenly froze mid-air. An elegant yet sinister voice rang out, "Hello there, Chief Yuan." As Yuan Gang turned toward the voice, he saw a man with a polite, squinting smile. The man bowed slightly toward Yuan Gang with a gentle smile on his face. Yuan Gang's expression darkened. One of the 3 oldest gods in the Murmur Ancient Gods cult, and also the creator of the Believer contract. Murmur smiled. "I never expected to be remembered by you, the deputy captain of the Shangjing City Squad. What an honor." Yuan Gang continued to ask, "This disaster was all you're doing, wasn't it? What is your goal? Is it Lin Seven-Night? Just a newcomer from the pond stage, yet you personally intervened." Murmur gracefully waved his hand and said, "Personally intervening is an overstatement. After all, what stands here now is merely a projection of my nightmare. As for Lin Seven-Night, he should already be making contact with my believer by now. And my task is much simpler. That is simply to stall you. So Chief Yuan, sink into my nightmare." As soon as the words fell, a purple light suddenly erupted around Yuan Gang, enveloping him completely. In the next second, he vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, Lin Seven-Night and his group had already arrived at the target village, and the rescue mission was completed. Instructor Hong, the team leader, reported the situation to the general headquarters. But upon hearing the situation described over the walkie-talkie, he froze in shock. Then Instructor Hong said with a serious expression, "According to the situation at the headquarters, it seems the chief has gone missing." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. Fatty said with disbelief, "But he's a C-stage powerhouse, there shouldn't be any accidents, right? Maybe he had something to do and left early." Instructor Hong shook his head and said, "First, take a day to rest here and wait for the rescue team. If you notice anything unusual, you are not to act on your own. Under these circumstances, the commander would never abandon us while we are still in the midst of a rescue. He must have encountered an accident." Molly is comforting the little girl who was just rescued at this moment. "Don't be afraid, sweetie. We're here to protect you. What's your name?" The little girl nods and says, "My name is Yaya." After comforting the little girl, Molly brought her out. Fatty suddenly asked, "By the way, where are your mom and dad?" Yaya pointed to the South Jean Mountain in front of her and said, "Dad went into the mountain this morning. Then it started pouring rain, so Mom went up the mountain to look for Dad. They haven't come back yet." Upon hearing this, the group couldn't help but exchange glances. Azure Bamboo said, "I think we should go in search. We can split into 2 teams." At that moment, Instructor Hong's voice rang out, "No, the chief is missing, and the situation is unclear. Now is definitely not a rational choice to disperse. Moreover, the location where they entered the mountain is too close to the mudslide outbreak point. Under those circumstances, it's almost impossible to escape." Yuan Gang walked over to Yaya and patted her shoulder. "The Night Watchers are human too, not gods. We can't save everyone." As he spoke, he turned to the others. You've all worked hard for so long. Everyone go back inside and rest. Once the follow-up rescue team arrives, we'll head down the mountain. Hearing Instructor Hong say this, everyone began to move toward the house. But suddenly, Instructor Hong patted Shin Azure Bamboo on the shoulder and said, I still remember when you new recruits first entered the camp. Weak and overly sensitive. Especially you, Shun Azure Bamboo, with your explosive temper, and that punchable attitude of looking down on everyone. Now you can all run for so long without stopping to rescue people deep in the mountains. You've really changed. Witnessing your growth firsthand, perhaps this is the joy of being an instructor. Shun Azure Bamboo said with a low spirit. Even after running for so long, weren't there still people we couldn't save? Instructor Hong shook his head. But your growth is still far from enough. You are too naive, too young. Shin Azure Bamboo. When will you be able to fully calm your mind and control your emotions? Only then will you have truly grown. Late at night, Lin Seven-Night leaned against the staircase, feigning sleep. Suddenly, Fatty crept over to him stealthily and whispered, Seven-Night, something's wrong. Swagger Dude is gone. Azure Bamboo Trio searches and rescues. Li Jia encountered the enemy and lost her head. Ancient gods came with enemies at sea stage. Seven-Night intends to lure the enemy away. At the foot of South Jean Mountain, a figure is sprinting rapidly up the mountain. Zooming in, it can be seen that it's a figure dressed in Night Watcher attire. That was Shun Azure Bamboo, heading alone up the mountain to search for Yaya's parents. Suddenly, shouts rang out from behind Shun Azure Bamboo. Brother Shun, wait for us. We can't run anymore. Only then did Shun Azure Bamboo realize someone was behind him. Turning to look, he saw it was the Li brothers, Jia and Liang. Shun Azure Bamboo asked in surprise, Why have you come? Li Liang explained, We knew, Brother Shun, you wouldn't be able to rest easy and would secretly come to find Yaya's parents. So we took the chance while going to the restroom to sneak out. Shun Azure Bamboo pretended to be nonchalant, saying, I just got tired of sitting and came out for some fresh air. Before Shun Azure Bamboo could say anything more, Li Jia suddenly swung his flashlight and exclaimed, Brother Shun, look over here. Shun Azure Bamboo followed the beam of light and saw a shoe that had fallen on the ground. There were no signs of it being dried by the wind, clearly left there only after the mudslide had occurred. Li Liang exclaimed with excitement, Indeed, Yaya's parents aren't dead. Shun Azure Bamboo dropped the pretense and nodded, saying, Very likely. Let's split up and search the nearby area. Let's see if there are any other clues. On the other side, after hearing Lin Seven-Night's explanation, Fatty exclaimed in surprise, So you're saying they sneaked off to look for someone? How did you know? Lin Seven-Night casually remarked. With Shun Azure Bamboo's personality, how could he possibly not go? Fatty thought for a moment and said, Seven-Night, do you think we should sneak out too and help them? Lin Seven-Night smiled and said, Of course we'll help, but charging into the mountains recklessly like they did is definitely not the way. We need to be strategic. Don't worry. I've already started searching the mountain. In the darkness of the night, countless bats, cloaked in a veil of twilight, darted and flew throughout the entire South Jean Mountain. Shun Azure Bamboo and the other two had already split up to search separately. Li Jia held a flashlight and continuously searched through the forest. At that moment, a rustling sound came from the woods beside him. Li Jia changed direction and walked toward the source of the sound. After taking just a few steps, a sudden look of delight appeared on Li Jia's face. He spotted a blurry figure carrying something behind the grove of trees. He approached in a few steps and asked, Are you Yaya's father? The visitor was a huge, bald man. He stared at Li Jia and laughed. What, Yaya? I don't know any Yaya. But you, little one, your head looks ripe enough. It's about time to be plucked. With that said, he raised the massive axe he was carrying under Li Jia's terrified gaze. The next moment, Shun Azure Bamboo and Li Liang heard Li Jia's piercing scream. Li Liang asked with some concern, Brother Shun, what is this sound? Shun Azure Bamboo turned around with a serious expression.